I always thought my life with Clara was a masterpiece, a canvas painted with trust and quiet joys. We'd been married 12 years, living in a modest house on the edge of town, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. I'm Daniel, a man of routine, carpenter by trade, steady hands, steady heart. Clara was the spark, the one who'd dance barefoot in the kitchen while I sanded oak into something useful. She worked at the library, her days filled with books and soft-spoken patrons. Our evenings were simple. Dinner, a glass of wine, her laughter cutting through my silences. I never doubted her, not once. Started with the phone. Hers always buzzing lately, a little too often for someone whose friends were mostly fictional characters. She'd smile, tap it silent, say it was just work. I believed her because doubting Clara felt like doubting the sun would rise. But one night, I saw the glow under the bedroom door. 2 a.m., her fingers tapping furiously. I asked who it was. Nobody, she said. Too quick, her voice a thread pulled tight. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Days later, I found the scarf. Red silk, tucked in her coat pocket, smelling of cologne that wasn't mine. I wear cedar and pine. This was sharp, expensive, like a city man's boast. I held it, my chest tightening, and asked her about it. A gift from a coworker, she said, eyes darting. For helping with a project. I nodded, but the air between us thickened. I started watching her then, really watching. The way she'd linger at the mirror, the new dresses she bought, the way she'd leave the room to take calls. I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but suspicion grows like mold in the dark. I followed her one Tuesday, after she said she was meeting a friend for coffee. She didn't go to the cafe. She drove to a house I didn't know. A sleek modern thing with glass walls and a black car in the drive. I parked a block away, watched her step out, her hair catching the light. A man opened the door, tall, broad-shouldered, hair slicked back. He pulled her inside, and the door shut like a guillotine. I sat there, hands gripping the wheel, my world tilting. Clara, my Clara, vanishing into another man's life. I didn't storm in. I didn't shout. I drove home, the scarf in my lap, and let the silence scream for me. That night, she came back smelling of him, her smile a lie. How was coffee? I asked. Fine, she said, and kissed my cheek. I tasted betrayal in the air, bitter as unripe fruit. The next morning, I couldn't look at her the same. She hummed over breakfast, oblivious, buttering toast like nothing had shifted. I watched her hands, those delicate fingers I'd held through fevers and storms, knowing they'd touched someone else. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof, something solid to hold up against her lies. I'm a man who builds things. I couldn't unbuild my marriage on a hunch. I started digging. Her phone was locked now, a new habit, but I knew her habits better than she thought. She left it charging by the bed that night, and when she slept, I used her thumb, gently so she wouldn't wake, to unlock it. Messages glowed in the dark. A name I didn't know. Marcus. Missed you today, he wrote. Tomorrow. Her reply. Can't wait. My stomach churned, but I scrolled further. Plans? Meetups. Words I couldn't unsee. She'd been weaving this web for months. Marcus. I didn't know him, but I'd seen him, that man at the glass house. I searched his name online, found a profile. Marcus Valor, architect, 38, single. His face stared back, smug, polished, a man who took what he wanted. I pictured Clara with him, laughing, her head on his chest, and my hands shook. I copied the address from her texts, memorized it. I'd go back. I'd see it all. The next day, I called in sick and followed her again. She left work early, drove to his place. This time, I parked closer, binoculars from an old camping trip in hand. Through the glass walls, I saw them, her in his arms, his hands on her waist, her head thrown back in a way I hadn't seen in years. They moved like they'd done this 100 times. A dance I wasn't invited to. I watched until the lights dimmed, until my eyes burned. I drove home, the scarf on the seat beside me, a relic of her deceit. That night, She came back late, claiming a book club. I nodded, poured her wine, watched her sip it. I wondered how she could sit there, her lips still warm from him, and look me in the eye. I didn't sleep. I planned. Revenge wasn't a word I'd ever lived by, but it rooted in me now, deep and dark, a seed waiting for water. Clara didn't notice the change in me. I kept my voice steady, my hands busy, sanding wood in the garage while my mind carved something sharper. I needed to know how far this went, how deep her betrayal ran. I bought a small camera online, discreet, the kind hunters use for trails. I hid it in her car under the passenger seat, angled to catch her face. I wasn't proud of it, but pride was a luxury I'd lost. The footage came 2 days later. She drove to Marcus's, talking on the phone. His voice, smooth and low, crackling through the speaker. "You're my escape," she said, laughing. "Daniel's so predictable." Predictable. The word hit like a hammer. I watched her park, fix her hair, step out with a smile I hadn't earned in years. The camera caught her leaving hours later, her blouse wrinkled, her cheeks flushed. I played it again, then again, until her laughter was a blade in my ribs. I started tracking her patterns. Tuesdays and Thursdays, always late at work or meeting friends. I followed her 3 more times, each visit to Marcus's house a nail in the coffin of us. I learned his life too, his routines, his arrogance. He'd leave his car unlocked, his windows open, a man too comfortable in his theft. I began to see him not as a rival, but as a target. At home, I played the husband she expected. I cooked her favorite meals, asked about her day, let her lies pile up like dust. She'd talk about books, the library, her quiet life, and I'd nod, my silence a mask. I started sketching in the garage, not furniture but ideas, ways to unravel them both. I didn't want quick anger. I wanted something lasting, something they'd carry like scars. One night, she came home humming, her eyes bright. "Good day?" I asked. "The best," she said, and kissed me. I tasted him on her, faint but there, and my resolve hardened. I poured her wine, watched her drink, and thought of the camera, the footage, the truth she didn't know I held. The game was mine now, and I'd play it slow. I needed more than proof, I needed leverage. Marcus wasn't just a fling. He was a fixture, a stain spreading across my life. I dug deeper. His architecture firm had a website, glossy and proud, listing projects and clients. I called one, posing as a contractor, and learned he was bidding on a big job, renovating the town hall. A man like him thrived on reputation, on being seen as untouchable. I filed that away, a thread to pull later. At home, Clara grew careless. She'd leave her phone out, trusting my predictable nature. I read more messages, plans for a weekend away, her telling him I'd be at a woodworking expo. She was right. I'd planned to go. Now I wouldn't. I let her think I was leaving, packed a bag, kissed her goodbye. "Have fun," she said, her smile too wide. I drove off, circled back, parked down the street. Marcus arrived an hour later, carrying wine and a grin. They didn't close the curtains. I watched from the shadows, my own house a stage for their performance. Her laughter echoed through the walls I'd built, his hands on the furniture I'd crafted. I didn't break down the door. I took photos, grainy, but clear enough. Evidence wasn't enough. I wanted ruin. I spent the weekend in a motel plotting. I remembered a story from my grandfather. A man wronged who didn't lash out but waited, letting his enemy's own weight crush him. I'd do the same. Marcus's firm had rivals. I found them online, sent anonymous tips about his unprofessional conduct, attaching a photo. I didn't stop there. I hacked her library email. Her password was still our anniversary, and sent a vague, flirty message to a coworker, signing her name. Let her explain that. When I returned Sunday, she was all smiles. "How was the expo?" she asked. "Enlightening," I said, unpacking my bag. She didn't see the storm brewing. I'd only begun. Her lies were a house of cards, and I'd blow it down, piece by piece, until she stood in the wreckage. The first cracks showed a week later. Clara came home rattled, her face pale. "Something weird happened at work," she said, stirring soup I'd made. "What?" I asked, feigning concern. "Someone sent an email from my account to Tom, the assistant manager. It sounded like I was hitting on him." She laughed, nervous. "They're looking into it." I nodded, hiding my satisfaction. Tom was married, uptight, perfect for a scandal. Marcus felt it too. I'd mailed his rival firm more photos, this time of him and Clara at his place, time-stamped. No note, just the images. Word spread fast in a small town. His bid for the town hall faltered. Whispers of unreliable character reached me through a friend at the hardware store. I saw him once, leaving a meeting, his jaw tight. Good. Let him squirm. Clara's weekend lie unraveled next. I'd left a note in her car, and signed, typed, "I know about Marcus." She found it Thursday, came home shaking. "Daniel, did you write this?" she asked, holding it up. Her eyes searched mine, fear flickering. "No," I lied, calm as stone. "Who's Marcus?" She froze, then stammered, "Just a friend." I let it hang, watched her fidget through dinner. She didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing. I escalated. I hired a kid from the neighborhood, cash, no questions, to drop a package at Marcus's office. The red scarf, a photo of them, and a single word, "Caught." I didn't sign it. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. Clara's phone buzzed less now. Their messages grew terse. "What's happening?" he wrote. "I don't know," she replied. "Someone knows." I smiled, sanding a table, imagining their panic. Friday, I cooked her favorite meal, roast chicken, rosemary, the works. She barely ate, her eyes darting to her phone. "You okay?" I asked, pouring wine. "Just tired," she said, forcing a smile. I leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You can tell me anything." She flinched. I savored it. The revenge wasn't loud, not yet. It was a slow burn, a fire licking at their edges, and I held the match. Clara's unraveling was a quiet thing at first, like a thread pulled loose from a sweater. She stopped humming in the mornings, her eyes darting to corners of the room as if expecting shadows to speak. I kept my mask on, concerned husband, steady Daniel, while the gears of my plan turned. Marcus was fraying too. I'd heard through my friend at the hardware store that his firm lost the town hall contract. "Some scandal," my friend said, shrugging. "Guy's a mess." I nodded, hiding the thrill that coursed through me. I upped the stakes. Clara's library had a community board, a quaint little thing for notices and flyers. I printed a photo, her and Marcus mid-embrace, faces blurred but her red scarf unmistakable, and pinned it up late one night. No name, no note, just the image. By morning, whispers would spread. Librarians love a mystery. I imagined her seeing it, her hands trembling as she tore it down, wondering who knew. She came home that day, her face a storm. "Someone's messing with me," she said, voice tight. "At work. A picture. Some stupid prank." I stirred the stew I'd made, kept my tone light. "What kind of picture?" She hesitated, then muttered, "Just me and a friend. It's nothing." I let it drop, but her lie hung heavy between us. That night, she locked her phone in a drawer. A new habit. Too late, Clara. I'd already cloned it, software from a shady site, easy enough for a man with patience. Marcus called her that evening. I listened through the app, earbuds in while I sanded a chair. "This is getting out of hand," he said, his voice sharp. "Who's doing this?" Clara's reply was a whisper. "I don't know. I'm scared." He sighed. "We need to cool off. Lay low." She didn't argue. I smiled. Cooling off wouldn't save them. I was just warming up. I mailed Marcus a letter next. Typed, no signature. "Your career's next," it read, with a photo of him leaving his office, time-stamped. I'd taken it myself, parked across the street. Let him wonder how close I was, how much I saw. I wanted him paranoid, checking his locks, doubting his charm. Clara, too. She'd started jumping at noises, glancing at me like I might know something. I did, and I savored her unease like a fine wine. The library called Clara in early the next day. Some issue with her email again. I'd sent another message, this time to her boss, hinting at personal distractions affecting her work. Nothing explicit, just enough to raise eyebrows. She left in a rush, her coat misbuttoned, and I followed at a distance. She didn't go to Marcus's. She drove to a park, sat on a bench, and stared at nothing. I watched from my truck, her shoulders hunched, her world shrinking. I shifted focus to Marcus. His firm had a gala coming up, black tie, big clients, a chance to salvage his reputation. I RSVP'd as a +1 using a fake name and a borrowed suit. I'd been invisible my whole life. No one would notice me. The night came and I slipped in, a ghost among the glitter. Marcus stood at the center, glass in hand, laughing too loud. I waited until he stepped away, then spiked his drink. Not with anything dangerous, just enough laxative to ruin his night. He didn't make it through his speech. Halfway in, he froze, face paling, and bolted for the bathroom. The room buzzed, laughter rippling. I left before the chaos peaked, drove home, and greeted Clara with a smile. "Rough day?" I asked. She nodded, distracted. "You have no idea." I did, though. I had every idea. The next morning, she got a text from Marcus, short, furious. "Last night was a disaster. We're done." She didn't reply, just sat there, phone in hand, eyes glassy. I poured her coffee, asked about her plans. "Work," she mumbled. I knew she'd hear the gala story soon. Small towns talk. I'd planted seeds there too. Whispers to a caterer about Marcus's affair with a married woman. Let the vines grow. That night, I cooked again. Steak, her favorite, a peace offering she didn't deserve. She ate in silence, her phone off for once. I watched her, this stranger in my wife's skin, and felt the weight of what was coming. Revenge wasn't loud yet, but it was close, a storm gathering strength. Clara's cracks widened. She took a sick day, unheard of for her, and stayed in bed, claiming a headache. I brought her tea, played the doting husband, but my eyes were on her phone, buzzing in the drawer. I checked it later, Marcus again, begging to meet. "I need to explain," he wrote. She didn't respond. I did, though, from her account. "Fine. Tomorrow, noon, your place." He'd wait and she wouldn't show. Let him stew in his own mess. I went bigger. Marcus's car, always unlocked, a habit of arrogance, sat outside his office. I slipped in late, planted a burner phone under the seat, set to ping a signal. I'd read about tracking apps. It was simple enough. Now I'd know where he went, who he saw. I also left a note on his dash. "She's not yours anymore." No signature, just the words. He'd find it, and the questions would gnaw at him. Clara noticed the shift in me, subtle as it was. "You seem different," she said over dinner, her fork hovering. "Happier." I smiled, cutting my chicken. "Just enjoying life." She frowned, unsure, and I let her wonder. The library board called her that day. Rumors of her email antics had reached them. She'd have to explain herself soon, and I'd made sure the story was muddy enough to stick. I visited Marcus's neighborhood next, under cover of dusk. His trash bin sat out, careless like him. I dug through, found receipts, a torn letter from a client canceling a project. His life was crumbling, and I was the wind eroding it. I kept a receipt, proof of a weekend he'd spent with Clara, a hotel 2 towns over. I'd use it later, a dagger held in reserve. That night, Clara cried in the bathroom, thinking I couldn't hear. I could, and I didn't comfort her. She'd built this cage. Let her sit in it. I sanded wood in the garage, the rhythm soothing, my mind sharp. The revenge was a symphony now, each note precise, building to a crescendo they'd never forget. Marcus didn't wait long to crack. The burner phone pinged. He'd driven to a bar, then a friend's place, then home, erratic loops of a man unmoored. I checked his messages to Clara. They'd turned desperate. "Call me, please." She didn't. I did, from the burner, late at night. He answered, voice thick. "Clara?" "No." I said low and calm. Someone who knows. I hung up before he could speak. Let the silence haunt him. Clara's meeting with the library board came. She dressed carefully, her hands shaking as she buttoned her blouse. "Wish me luck," she said, forcing a smile. "Good luck," I replied, meaning none of it. She returned hours later, ashen. "They're investigating," she whispered. "Someone said I've been inappropriate." I feigned shock. "That's awful. Who'd say that?" She shook her head, lost. I knew me, through a typed letter mailed to her boss, vague but damning. I hit Marcus harder. His firm's website had a contact page. I flooded it with fake complaints, botched projects, rude behavior, using burner emails. His online reviews tanked overnight. I watched him leave his office the next day, shoulders slumped, a man sinking. I followed, saw him meet a woman, not Clara, at a cafe. A new fling, maybe, or a rebound. I snapped photos. Clara would see them soon, a twist of the knife. At home, I left the hotel receipt on the counter. Casual, like it had slipped from her purse. She found it, froze. "Where'd this come from?" she asked, voice trembling. "No idea," I said, chopping onions. "Yours?" She stammered. I don't know," and fled to the bedroom. I let her stew, her lies tangling tighter. That night, I dreamed of the house we'd built, her laughter, my hands shaping it. I woke to her beside me, a stranger now, and felt the cold clarity of my purpose. Revenge wasn't just pain. It was art, and I was the craftsman. They'd feel it soon, every stroke of my design. Clara broke first. She came to me Saturday, eyes red, clutching the receipt. "We need to talk," she said, voice small. I set down my coffee, leaned back. "About what?" She swallowed, then it spilled. Marcus, months of meetings, her escape from our quiet life. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, tears falling. I listened, face blank, letting her dig her grave. "I saw him," I said finally, "at his place. With you." Her breath caught and the room went still. She begged forgiveness, hands wringing, promising to end it. I nodded, said, "We'll see." She thought it was mercy. It wasn't. I'd already mailed Marcus the cafe photos, him with the new woman. Addressed to Clara's work, marked personal. She'd get them Monday, a fresh wound while her confession still bled. Let her wonder who sent them, how deep the betrayal ran both ways. Marcus called her that night. I listened through the clone. "Who's doing this?" he snapped. "I don't know," she sobbed. "Daniel knows." Silence, then, "We're done. I can't take this." He hung up, and she cried alone. I stayed in the garage, sanding, the sound a steady pulse. His firm fired him the next day. Too many complaints, too much noise. I'd called in a tip, anonymous, about financial discrepancies. They found nothing, but the doubt was enough. I left Clara a gift Sunday. The scarf, folded on her pillow, with a note. "Remember this?" She found it, gasped, and confronted me. "What's this mean?" she asked, trembling. "You tell me," I said, calm. She didn't answer, just stared, realizing I wasn't the man she'd left behind. That night I cooked again, her favorite, a mockery now. She ate in silence, defeated, while I planned the final act. Revenge wasn't over. It was peaking, a wave about to crash. They'd drown in it, and I'd watch from the shore. Clara's confession didn't soften me. It fueled me. She thought her tears would rebuild what she'd burned, but I was past repair. Monday came, and with it, the photos I'd sent to her work. Marcus with his new woman, delivered in a plain envelope. She came home that evening, face a mask of shock. "Someone sent these," she said, holding them up, her voice breaking. "To the library." I raised an eyebrow, feigned surprise. "Who's that with him?" She didn't answer, just sank into a chair, the weight of her own game crushing her. I'd already moved on Marcus again. His firing left him scrambling, so I nudged him further down. I'd kept his trash finds, receipts, a client list, and mailed them to his old firm, hinting at stolen data. No proof, just suspicion, enough to keep him blacklisted. I tracked him with the burner phone. He'd moved to a cheap apartment, his glass house sold. I smiled, imagining him in that cramped space, his arrogance peeling like old paint. Clara's library job hung by a thread. The board's investigation deepened. My planted emails, the photo on the board, whispers I'd fed through a fake tip line. She spent hours on the phone, pleading her case, while I cooked dinner, humming her old tunes. "They might suspend me," she said one night, voice hollow. "I'm sorry you're going through this." I lied, serving her soup. She didn't taste the irony. I left her another note Tuesday, slipped into her purse. "You chose him over us." She found it at work, called me in a panic. "Daniel, did you write this?" I denied it, calm as ever. "Why would I?" She hung up, doubt creeping in. I wanted her to question everything. Me, Marcus, herself. That night, she slept on the couch, the scarf beside her like a ghost. I stayed up, sketching my final moves. The revenge was a web now, tightening around them both. Marcus's desperation grew. He'd texted Clara, "I'm leaving town. This is too much." She didn't reply. I did, from her phone. Good riddance. Let him think she'd cut him loose. Let him feel the sting. I cooked her breakfast the next day, watched her pick at it, her spirit fraying. The end was close, and I'd orchestrate it with precision. Marcus's exit was my cue. I tracked him to a motel on the highway, the burner phone pinging his shame. I drove there, parked across the lot, and watched him load a suitcase into his car. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched, a man running from shadows I'd cast. I didn't approach. I mailed him one last package instead. Photos of him and Clara, the scarf's receipt, a note. "You'll never outrun this. No return address. Let it follow him wherever he went." Clara's suspension came Wednesday. She came home, eyes dull, and told me over coffee. 2 weeks, maybe more. "They don't trust me." I nodded, sympathetic on the surface. "That's rough. You'll get through it." She stared at me, searching for something. Guilt, maybe, or forgiveness. She found neither. I'd emptied our joint account that morning, moved the money to a new one she couldn't touch. Not theft, just strategy. She'd notice soon. I planted more seeds at home. I left her phone unlocked one night, a message drafted to Marcus. "I miss you. Come back." She'd find it, wonder if she'd written it in a haze. She did the next morning and confronted me. "Did you touch my phone?" she asked, voice sharp. "Why would I?" I said, sipping tea. She backed off, uncertain, her grip on reality slipping. I watched her pace. A caged bird, I'd clipped myself. The library gossip reached me through a neighbor. Clara's scandal was the talk of the stacks. I'd fueled it, dropping hints at the hardware store, letting them spread. She stopped leaving the house, her world shrinking to our walls. I cooked her meals, kept the routine, but the air between us was a blade. "You're so calm," she said once, eyes narrow. "Always," I replied, smiling. She didn't know how deep my calm ran, how cold. That night, I sanded a new project. A box, small and intricate, a gift for later. Clara watched from the doorway, silent. I hummed, let her feel the distance. Revenge wasn't loud. It was this, her life unraveling while I stood steady, the architect of her fall. Clara noticed the money Friday. "Where's our savings?" she asked, voice rising, bank app open on her phone. I shrugged, chopping carrots. "Must be a glitch. I'll check." I wouldn't. She called the bank, got nowhere. My new account was airtight, my name only. She slammed the phone down, glared at me. "This isn't a glitch, Daniel." I met her eyes, calm. "What are you saying?" She faltered, backed off. Doubt was her prison now, and I held the key. Marcus surfaced again. Texted her from a new number. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I intercepted it, replied, "No, you're nothing." He didn't write back. I deleted the thread, left her phone clean. She'd never know he'd reached out, never feel that lifeline. I mailed his motel a final blow. His client list, sent to a competitor with a note. He's selling secrets. True or not, it'd bury him deeper. Clara's suspension stretched. The board hinted at termination. She spent days in bed, the fight gone from her. I brought her tea, left notes. We'll figure this out, playing the husband she'd lost. She stopped asking about the money, the notes, the scarf. She stopped asking anything. I cooked, sanded, lived around her like she was a ghost. The house felt mine again, her presence a fading echo. I spread one last rumor. Clara and Marcus, a public affair, whispered to a chatty cashier. It hit the library, sealed her fate. She got the call Saturday, fired. She didn't cry, just sat there, staring at the wall. What now? She whispered. You tell me, I said, pouring wine. She didn't drink it. I did, savoring the taste of her defeat. That night, I finished the box. Mahogany, polished, a lock with no key. Inside, I'd put the scarf, the photos, her lies. A time capsule of her ruin. I'd give it to her soon, the final note in my symphony. Revenge was complete, but the curtain hadn't fallen. Not yet. Clara's collapse was total by Sunday. She didn't get out of bed, didn't eat the breakfast I left. I let her rot there, her silence a victory. I'd taken everything. Her job, her lover, her trust, and left her with nothing but questions. Marcus was gone, his motel room empty when I checked the tracker. I pictured him driving nowhere, haunted by my gifts, a man erased. I'd won, but the final stroke waited. I packed her things Monday. Clothes, books, the scarf, into boxes, labeled them Clara's. She found them in the living room, stared. What's this? She asked, voice a rasp. You're leaving, I said, matter of fact. I can't live with this anymore. She blinked, processing, then begged. Daniel, please. I'll change. I cut her off. Too late. She sank to the floor, sobbing, but I felt nothing. I gave her the mahogany box then, placed it in her hands. Open it when you're gone, I said. She clutched it, trembling, didn't ask what was inside. I knew she'd find the scarf, the photos, a note. You built this. Let her carry it, a weight she'd never shed. I called a cab, watched her load the boxes, her movements slow, broken. She looked back once, eyes pleading. I turned away, closed the door. The house was mine again, quiet, whole. I sanded the table where she'd sat, erasing her presence. Her library friends called once, asking where she'd gone. She left, I said, simple. They didn't push. The town forgot her fast. Small scandals fade when the players vanish. I heard Marcus landed in a new city, took a low job, his name mud. Good enough. That night I cooked for one, steak, rare, a celebration. The revenge was done, a craft perfected. Clara would live with it, Marcus too, their lives shadows of what they'd been. I slept sound. The storm passed, my hands steady as ever. Weeks later, a letter came, Clara's handwriting, shaky. I opened the box. It read, I'm sorry. I don't know who I am anymore. No return address, no plea to come back. I burned it in the fireplace, watched the flames eat her words. She'd found the truth I'd locked inside, and it had broken her fully. I didn't care where she was. She wasn't here, and that was enough. Marcus's trail went cold. A friend mentioned seeing him once, haggard, working construction, ironic for an architect. I'd stripped him bare, left him to rebuild with nothing. I didn't check further. His ruin was complete. The town moved on, my name untouched, my life a quiet rhythm again. I built furniture, drank coffee, watched the trees sway. The house felt new, cleansed. I sold her car, donated her books, kept the scarf as a trophy. Folded in a drawer, a reminder of my craft. Neighbors asked about her sometimes. I shrugged, said, she needed a change. They nodded, let it drop. I didn't need their pity or their questions. I carved my piece from her chaos. One night, I dreamed of her. Not the Clara I'd loved, but the one I'd destroyed. She stood in a void, holding the box, silent. I woke calm, the image a seal on my work. Revenge wasn't loud or fast. It was this Methodical, lasting. A story I'd written in their bones. I'd lost a wife but gained something sharper. Control. Spring came and I planted a tree in the yard, oak strong, rooted. It'd grow slow, like my victory, outlasting them both. I cooked dinner, sat alone, and smiled. The table was mine, the house mine, the life mine. They'd betrayed me, and I'd repaid them tenfold. The end was cruel, yes, but it was mine to shape, and I'd shaped it well.